Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Back Porch Conversations. I want to thank you so much for coming onto my back porch tonight and joining me. This is actually episode 14, and I'm really excited. I got my friend Shamara with me tonight, and she is going to give a lot more about her. And just whether you're listening or watching for the first time, or you've been with us since we began, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to continue to share with you people's stories and experiences. I fully believe that we will all grow in unity and love for one another when we stop making assumptions and we just start listening to one another. And so I'm excited about tonight. I think we're going to learn a ton from one another, but I want to start the same way that we do every single week, which is why we do what we do. A few months back, at kind of the height, if you will, of the tension in our country, I began reading through the book of Mark, not for any purpose or reason, just because I felt like that's where God was leading me. And I was introduced to this story in Mark chapter 2, and it really just kind of revolutionized the way that I thought about this story. This is what it said. In Mark chapter 2, verse 1, it said, Jesus returned to Capernaum several days later. The news spread quickly that he was back home. And soon the house where he was staying was so packed with visitors that there was no more room, even outside the door. While he was preaching God's word to them, 4 men arrived carrying a paralyzed man on a mat. They couldn't bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, so they dug a hole through the roof above his head. They lowered the man on his mat right down in front of Jesus. Now, I was just blown away by this passage, and let me tell you why. Because I recognize that the men that carried this paralyzed man had never understood what being paralyzed meant. They were never paralyzed. They didn't understand his plight or his journey, but here's what they did know. They did know that they had an opportunity to listen, to hear his heart, and to hopefully help bring healing and reconciliation and restoration, because they knew where that genuinely would come from, and that was Jesus. And so they did everything they could to walk alongside, to hear this poor man's brokenness and his journey, and they learned and they listened, and then they acted. And they took a step to do something about it. And that's what this is. This is our back porch. This is where, for me, why do we bring people to my back porch? Because I believe that the back porch is where the most intimate conversations happen. You don't just invite anybody to your back porch. They got to come through all your mess and all your junk. They got to see your trash laying all over the place, or your dirty dishes. But at the end of the day, once they get here, these are often where the best conversations happen, because it's real, it's genuine. Everything kind of lowers a little bit, and we're able to create a safe space. And that's hopefully what we're going to do tonight. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is a conversation worth having, and not just worth having with one person, but with as many people as we can get onto my back porch. And so I want to take an opportunity right now, before we dive in, to invite you to do something, to invite you to share this, like this, subscribe to the YouTube, or like it on Facebook. We want this opportunity to be able to share this conversation with as many people as possible, because we believe in it. And we believe that it's going to be life-changing. And so we want to invite you to be a part of that, even after tonight stops. Or maybe you even know somebody who would like to be a part of the conversation, or you yourself would. I would love to interview you. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear your story. So hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. Hit me up anywhere you want to, and I'd love to have a conversation with you as well. But beyond all that, we have a great friend tonight, a friend who I am sure that you are going to really love at the end of all this, has a sweet spirit and a great heart. So I want to welcome and introduce to my back porch, Shamara Hunter. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor Chris.
Absolutely. So I would love for you to share a little about who you are and what you're doing right now, and kind of where you're at in life, and let everybody know a little bit about you.
Got you. So my name is Shamara. A lot of friends, family, they call me Rita. Originally, I am from a small town in Virginia, Louisa County, Virginia. So shout out to my hometown. But right now, I'm living in Maryland, where I've lived for maybe the last almost 8 years. And that's definitely been an amazing experience. I am a youth advocate, a current youth leader at my church, Restoration House International, which is in Beltsville, Maryland. And I also, as far as my job, I work for Time Organization, which we are a mental health and mental and behavior health organization. So at the end of the day, I love helping people. I love being able to give back to my community and just kind of be a voice and use my voice to help other people, to help uplift them. Like I said, I definitely am a youth advocate who strongly believe that as we continue to affirm this generation and affirm our youth, they won't have to question their existence later on. They'll actually just be able to embrace who they are. And I'm just grateful to be on Back Porch, to be able to have this conversation with Pastor Chris and his viewers, and everybody who will watch tonight. I mean, I believe this is going to be an amazing experience. But yeah, so I love working with you. Yeah, so that's a little about
That's
me.
awesome. Nah, that's so good. And we're going to dig in a whole lot into what you do now and how that has shaped really your calling and your purpose. Because I think it's really incredible what you're doing, and what even small part I've been able to play in it. I've been able to see your heart and your passion for that next generation. Before we dig into that, though, let's dig into the hard question, which is really for you. When was it that you recognized or realize that racism was real? And what did that do for you? What did that do to you?
So for me, I can say even as a child, like I came from a very, very small town in Virginia where, racism definitely is still evident, is still active. It may not be as strong as in some areas, but it's definitely there. I can remember, even, not saying really that I was bullied or teased because of, my color, but at the end of the day, I also, even in school, there were times where, I've seen and experienced racial comments, well, I'm not dealing with her. I don't want to play with her because she's black.
Mm,
Or even in the classroom, there were instances, where other students of other races received different privileges than a lot of us that were in class. So I definitely experienced that. But one experience I can say that kind of left a mark on me was, I had an individual in my family who actually experienced racism to a level, on a criminal level, so to speak.
mm,
And, they were accused of raping a Caucasian lady. Um, but the thing about it was, and I was a child when this happened, but there was no clear evidence. I mean, like I remember it like it was yesterday. How the lawyer was kind of in the courtroom, and he stated, it was a statement that he made. He literally said, "This is an all-white jury, and you're going to um, accuse and to you're going to confuse you're going to condemn this black man, and it's an all white jury." Literally, I remember, no evidence came, no DNA was there. I mean, nothing that proved that he was actually on the scene. And it was just so weird because the young lady, she gave a description. And the description didn't even match the defendant. It didn't even match him at all. But he was convicted, and he spent 13 years in prison for something that literally there was nothing to even prove that he did it. So for me, going through that was, and just kind of seeing and witnessing that, was when I really knew that, racism truly was alive and well. So that was really big for me. And I mean, that kind of made me feel like, what, a little hopeless in a sense,
mm,
thinking that, um, you know, I had to, try to work hard towards breaking the thoughts like, well, if I was white, maybe I would have,
mm,
um, different a different outcome in life. Or, maybe I could have went to a different school, or maybe I could have had better opportunities, because that's something that we always saw. It was not saying that we didn't see that in our families or in our communities where there were, you know, positive uh, or wealthy African Americans, but it was kind of pushed on us that, if you looked a certain way, if you didn't speak a certain way, then it wasn't as if you were actually
Mm.
accepted. And so that was the thing for me.
So
Yeah.
did that shift for you, like the way that you acted, the way that you presented yourself, the way that you, like what you would say, like all
Right.
of that, did that change who you were?
I can definitely say, honestly, it did. I remember times where I was preparing for job interviews. And that even a part of my journey, getting here, it was just like, it was job interview after job interview after job
Mm,
interview. And I'm like, I definitely know I'm qualified for these positions. Like, what in the world? Like, I'm
mm,
like, okay, well, I have everything that they kind of told us that you had to have, to match certain standards. I'm kind of like, I got it. So what's the big deal? What's the holdup? And I feel
mm,
that, honestly, I'm going to be honest and transparent. I felt that if I was white,
mm,
or yeah, if I was white, that I probably would have gotten those particular jobs a long time ago. But I am grateful to God because He kept my mind focused,
yeah,
even when I was just kind of like, this can't be life.
mm,
Like there has to be something greater. But He did allow me to secure the position that He had for me. So I can say, out of all of that, that's definitely something that kept me grounded. But I truly did. I thought for a long time, well, if I was white, I wonder if it would have happened
mm.
differently. So sometimes that those were the thoughts that were in the back of my mind, definitely.
Which is so like, to me, it's just so far fetched for my brain to think about that you have to think about the color of your skin when it comes to a job. Like, I've never walked out of a job interview and said, well, I bet if I was
Right.
blank. And that, to me, like, it just breaks my heart that there are still people today, hiring practices that are still skewed, that
Right.
are still saying we have to have people that look a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. And I know you're educated, you're sharp. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean. It's just, to me, like, you are a qualified, smart, sharp individual, regardless of the color of your skin. Like,
Right.
so for you to walk out of a job interview or to walk out of a conversation and say, well, I bet if I was a different color, that would have gone differently. That breaks my heart to know that's the mentality that, unfortunately, like you and many others
Yeah.
have to
Definitely.
walk in.
Right.
Um, so I wanna move into kind of some of your experiences that you would feel comfortable sharing about. So let's talk about the move. Let's talk about going from Virginia to
Whew.
Maryland. That was a big step for you.
It
You kind of
was.
you kind of walked with nothing, and so let's walk through the craziness of what
Got
God
you.
did in your life there.
So I'll never forget. I'll be honest, I was just in I could say I was in a dark season um
Mm,
of my life where I just was kind of like, I've been going to church all my life. So it was nothing different or new for me, just to go to church. But I just felt like, okay, God, there has to be something more to you than this.
mm,
And I never forget, I was home at my parents' house, and literally it was September 22nd. And I remember the date and everything. And literally, that was one of the first times that I ever heard God speak clearly. And He
mm,
literally said to me, "Move now." And I was kind of like, well, what do you mean? It's like, no, move now. And I can definitely say that He positioned us, because my sister and I, we actually moved together. And I can say it was because I knew God strategically placed me in the ministry that I'm a part of now, which, again, like I stated, is a restoration house. I never forget the story of even how I met my pastor. It was, I believe, 2009, where I met him at a conference, didn't even speak to him, didn't even know who he was. And then shortly after that, I was like, I'm going to find this preacher, it was just something. And so ever since then, it was just like, I've definitely been on a journey of transitioning from Virginia to Maryland, and it was not definitely it was not easy. I mean, I remember I did not have a job. Honestly, I just got a job in 2008, so I lived here for a long time before I even had a job. And again, it goes back to say, I was like, well, I'm qualified for these positions. I never forget there were times where I walked out of the interview and they're like, well, you're overqualified. I'm like, well, so now I have to dumb down who I am just to get a receptionist job. And I'm like, ma'am, I'm really just trying to apply for a position. So again, I mean, I had the qualifications, I met the standards, but again, it was just that missing link. Like, what in the world am I missing? But again, for a while, I lived here with no job, but I'm grateful that God still was able to. When people say He's a provider, I'm a witness that He is a provider because He provided for me. I didn't go without. I have never been evicted. Now, I'm not saying the struggle wasn't real. I'm not saying that the struggle wasn't, that it wasn't tough. But I mean, even the times where I'm like, I can't go through this. I'm going back home. Something really was just like, if I brought you here, I didn't bring you to this point in order to send you back. So it was just really important to remember what God told me when I moved. And so that's what honestly I've been living on. And again, it was because, I think God, He had a whole setup in mind. Literally starting back in maybe like 2009. He connected me to my pastor, my current pastor, Pastor Bishop Kenneth Chisholm, and even in that, I believe that one encounter with him at a conference literally led to my sister and I really relocating, and I know that what God is doing for me is definitely connected there. Yeah. So honestly, it's just being obedient and I just stepped on out. But it was the hardest decision that I think one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. But I definitely can say, it hasn't always been easy. But as I continue to live, I'm just like, okay, it definitely was worth it. Definitely stepping out because now, I'm able to really see the doors that are opening. Whereas before, I don't think, actually, I know it probably wouldn't have never happened. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about a door that opened because one of the things that I love that you do is a conference every year called Beyond the Beauty, and we're going to have a link. So if you want to be a part of this, it's a really great opportunity. You can sign up and you can register and be a part of this conference this year as well. But give me a little bit of the heart behind Beyond the Beauty and why you decided to do it, and really like what you're doing with that.
Gotcha. So honestly, it started from a hashtag. I was on Instagram one day and Kerry Washington, she had a hashtag that said Beyond Beauty. And I just kept thinking on it. I'm like, what in the world is this Beyond Beauty? And literally God gave me the vision that day. The conference came from that one hashtag Beyond the Beauty. And it focuses, starting out, this is year 5 and we're grateful. And so when, everything started coming together, God just kind of put it all on the table. He's like, I want you to, it started out with only young ladies. And so from there, it was just really to kind of empower them to embrace and love themselves. So we focused on identity. We focused on self-worth. We've been focusing on self-love. And the funny thing about it was those were the very areas that I've struggled the most with. Yeah. And so I was kind of like, God, this is so weird. Like, how can you tell me to host a conference for young girls and focus on the areas that I'm struggling in the most? And literally, it was kind of like a conversation. It was like, listen, I'm using what you're going through to be able to help these young people. And that's just what it was. So this conference is really about empowering and kind of breaking cycles, breaking barriers, breaking stigma that's related to beauty. Our
Mm.
whole focus this year is kind of the definition of me. So it's kind of like, who are you? Like, who do you feel that you are? So that we can begin to tackle those heart issues that, you don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. You don't have to compare yourself to society standards, but to be able to truly embrace the beauty in the person that you really are. And so that's kind of the basic, of what we do and who we are. We have some amazing things like, teaching them how to set a dinner table, or what is it like for young men to actually be able to tie a necktie.
Mm.
Some of those things that they are not learning. Some of those things that, a lot of times today it's not there because nobody's teaching them. And the things that they don't know, it's kind of like, who's to blame?
Mm.
Who's raising them, or who's empowering and mentoring these young people. So I really think that it's important for us to kind of show them what we want them to kind of know and to be able to embrace.
Yeah.
So that's what it's about.
I love it. And it's so good. I'm really excited for this year as well. And so be a part of that. It's a great conference. It's a great opportunity to get your young person involved. If you have a kid or you have a youth group that you're with or a church you're with, take a look, be a part of that. It's a great opportunity. Let's talk about kind of your kind of pivoting down to you personally now.
Yes.
You've been working in the DMV area for a long time. You've seen kind of the struggles that are there and what you're up against, especially within your job and even outside of your job. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what are you seeing personally, and how are you being affected by the struggle that you're seeing day in and day out where you are?
Got you. So for me, like, even with the population that, I work with, I'm actually serving the population I'm serving. I see that there are a lot of issues in the African American communities that are overlooked, especially when it comes to mental health, medical health. Those things are addictions.
Mm.
Those things, it's kind of hard to see sometimes. But it becomes the ugly truth.
Yeah.
And it becomes the point where it's kind of like, I know there are so many agencies, there are so many organizations that are trying to assist, but it's like, are to what degree, are we actually trying to help these individuals?
Mm.
And I just think sometimes we can just get so caught up in missing this population, whether it's from at-risk youth and juveniles to, again, those suffering with mental health issues, those suffering with the need of actual therapists. That's some of the things that I've definitely seen in our community in the DMV area. And honestly, to me, although I know it's just, some people think that it's just a job, but for me, it's a heart thing, and it really pulls on my heart to be able to try to help our communities as much as possible, to really, even if it's trying to supply resources or find resources, or just to assist them with overcoming the actual barriers that they are experiencing. Because I think a lot of times we try to fix, how can I say it? Fix the exterior, or fix the surface. That's the word. Fix the surface, but we never get to the root.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, we can give them a 12-step program, or we can send them here or there, but it's kind of like, what are the underlying issues that have caused so much trauma or so much hurt, in our communities that have never been addressed. And that for me is part of my main concern, is being able to help assist with addressing these issues at the core.
Yeah. You talk a lot about breaking the cycle, the mindset, and that constant pattern that has to be broken. So, what are, at least in your opinion, what are some ways that we can break the cycle within the different cultures that you work in with? And really, I think even that's broader than that. I think it can be applicable to everybody. What are some ways that we can break the cycle? How do we shift our mindset?
Got you. Well, for me, I'm a strong believer that our mindsets change, like even seeking God more.
Hmm.
That whole piece of just being prayerful. And I believe like even as believers, being able to stand on the front line in prayer and actually war against some of the things that we're actually seeing, because these things are not new. Whether it's from racism to mental health disorders. Like none of this stuff is really, really new. And if you think about even everything, the race war that's going on, you know, I mean, Black Lives Matter, I support it. I really believe that, they are doing good. They are making an impact. But for me, it's kind of like, does it end there? You know, um, I've said it before, like, when we put down the bullhorns, when we stop marching, what's next? And for me, it's kind of like what's next for our communities,
Yeah.
what's next for our youth, like literally what's next. And I've watched, in the past maybe 7, 8 months, not just the innocent people that have been killed by police officers, but I look at the communities where they're actually still killing each other as well, and that goes across the board, and that's not just limited to African American communities. But again, what happens when the bullhorn is silent? And I understand. A lot of times people say, "Well, Black Lives Matter is about the systematic problems that are going on," but for me, they are one, and they're interchangeable, because if you break the system, you break the cycle.
Hmm.
And when you break the cycle, you break the system.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it begins with that mindset change, because if we have the bullhorn and we're screaming Black Lives Matter, it has to also matter to you as well. It has to also matter to the extent where it's like, okay, we want to break these systems that have been put in place. We want to break these racial barriers. We want to break these things. But at the core of it all, you have to have knowledge. Like, so are we actually going back after the march and educating your community on how to now be in political positions that when you can break those cycles or you can change those systems? Like telling them that education matters. Okay, we get that. But how do they get from that point? How can we empower them to survive? Even in such trauma, surviving through so much trauma. Like we are not providing them. I don't think we're properly providing them with actual tools that they need to break the system, because everybody says this is a now generation. This we have to empower the generation coming up, but what are we empowering them with?
Yeah, that's good.
Like what are the tools that we're actually setting them up with, opposed to showing them just how to limit themselves. I support it. It's making an impact. People across the world are being able to participate with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. But I just personally don't feel that it should stop there. Yes, that was a starting ground, but it's until we have conversations like these where you are, and I'm just transparent, you're a white man, I'm a Black woman, but to be able to have candid, open conversations um, about race
Yeah.
and still
Yeah.
be able to, even if we disagree, but come to a common ground, even if you're sitting at a table where there's so many different nationalities, so many different colors. Sometimes I personally believe it's going to take us sitting down with those very people who are considered murderers.
Mm.
Because at the end of it all, it's kind of like, not just to say, I want to understand what you feel, but what made you do that?
Yeah.
Like what makes you hate someone so much that you would actually take their lives? Like, and I believe it was a movie, and I think it was called The Best Enemies. And it was with Taraji P. Henson and oh man, I forgot the other main star, but it's a real film based out of North Carolina, where the leader at the time of the KKK, He was like one of the top leaders. She was a Black activist. They actually had to, for a community program that was going on in that area, they literally sat down and had to talk to each other. Now, starting out, of course, they hated each other's guts. I
Right.
mean, he wanted to kill her, she wanted to kill him. But eventually, they literally started talking to each other. And you know how it started? One conversation. And in that conversation, though it was tension, they were still able to, okay, well, you know what? Maybe he's not that bad. Maybe she's not that bad.
Yeah.
And it took in the movie for her to actually help him with his autistic son.
Wow.
She helped him with his son, and that changed his life. So for me as a believer, that says to me that it can happen.
Yeah.
It can happen when we literally begin to show people love
Mm.
and to love them whether they look like me,
Yeah, that's
whether
good.
they come from where I come from, whether they represent what I represent. Sometimes you have to show your enemy the love of Christ, and I
Yeah.
believe that's the heart of the matter. But it may not always be comfortable settings, but I really do feel that conversations across the board needs to be had in
Yeah.
order to gain an understanding of to understand the change that's needed, the change that's required to actually make a difference. And I just look at, how bold this generation is. I had conversations with kind of when the whole George Floyd thing started. I actually had a Zoom meeting with my youth department, and I literally sat down with them and asked them questions. Of course, just kind of how they felt about it, but I asked them what change did they want to see, and just listening to their responses, just hearing, even as 16 and 17-year-olds, hearing their responses, like, I really just want to know why they feel that way. And like literally that was the basis of it all. Like, why do you actually feel this way? Why are you intimidated by how I look instead of loving me for who I am? And those are some of the questions that they literally have on the table. But again, I believe that when we teach them how to be in the boardroom or how to get into the boardroom, that the voice that God gave them will be able to change a nation. And that's just what I feel.
That's
Like
good.
I support the movements that are happening, but I really feel that it has to go deeper than where we are.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've got a young man coming on who is a freshman in high school this year, who's going to come on, who lives in downtown Baltimore, and share his own personal fears and his own personal story. And I think what you're talking about right now, because I've sat with Pastor Raymond on his Zoom calls, and I've heard their questions and I've heard their fears, and it's eye opening when you begin to see the genuine way that many people in our country feel like they have to live in order to survive.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's not like I'm not worried about where the paycheck comes from. That's not the deepest fear in my soul. And I just, for me, I think our eyes have to be opened to understanding that people live differently than we do and fears that are different than we do. And it is our job, I think, for me at least, as somebody in the white majority culture, to step out of my comfort zone and say, I've got your back. I'm here for you, and I'm going to walk alongside you, as uncomfortable as it's going to be. It's important. And I love a statement that you've made, that you said right now you feel like people are making a whole lot of noise but making a little impact. And I think you're right. Like, we have to move from making noise to genuine change and action. And we got on our soapboxes about all of this, the stuff that's happening now with all the professional leagues. And I'm glad at a lot of levels that they're taking some measures forward. but it goes beyond putting letters on a jersey or on a basketball court. How are we taking the opportunity and privilege that even they have and changing the communities and changing that? So I'm with you 100%. I love what you're doing. I love how you're trying to make an impact and using your influence even within your community to do that. And so I'm just honored to be able to listen to stories like yours and many others who are doing exactly what you're doing. So I just wonder. I always try at the end. We try to give away some resources that are ways for people to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to invite people, if they haven't done anything else, to hop into Tasha Morrison's Be the Bridge group on Facebook and read her book and all those kind of things. Are super incredible and accessible. She got some great articles and things to read for people who are just getting started. So it's a really easy on-ramp for you. So I'd encourage you guys. I don't get paid to say that. I don't get paid anything, actually. It's fine. I'm not doing this for any sort of money. So I believe that she's doing some incredible things. So I always want to encourage people to do that. Maybe one day she'll listen and thank me. But if not, it's totally fine as well. But what about for you? What are some resources, some ways that people you can give some people to learn and grow?
Definitely. I know for myself, again, for the population that I'm definitely serving and leading and working with our young people. Um, a few months back, I was able to actually step out of their comfort zone and launch Reach Out Now LLC, which we are a mentoring um, firm where we are really trying to grab our youth and really, because sometimes I just feel that sometimes the older generations may not be as open to listen and not have conversations just to hear or to respond, but to actually listen and to be able to, sit again to have these type of conversations. So that is definitely one resource. And, if I'm able to, share anymore, I would definitely share, and just continue to assist and push other people forward.
I love it. And we always want to, as you said at the beginning when we were talking about Beyond the Beauty, it's a great opportunity for many students. And a word that you used a lot when we were talking before tonight was to affirm the youth of this generation, that they matter and that they have this opportunity to see change happen. And I think that's so pivotal. And I think it's a great movement that I want to support and get behind.
Thank you.
As well.
Thank you for your support already.
Absolutely. Shamara, thank you so much for taking time tonight with me and sharing your story and sharing. I know things in your past that you probably don't like to talk about and bring up, and I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody as we close out, the same thing I try to remind everybody every week, that these are not conversations that are going to have change happen overnight, but that we had to be committed to seeing the change happen, to see the fact that my children, your children, that will work and live in a different world than we do. And we can be a part of that change, but it takes time. And I want to remind everybody as well to remember that this is all about learning. It's an opportunity to learn in humility, to learn from one another, to recognize that we are not all the same, but we can all learn from one another and learn each other's stories and learn each other's hopefully heartbeats, so that we can really support and love one another well, the way that we were designed to. I'd love for you guys to come with us next week. It's going to be a great week. I'm excited. I don't want to share who it is yet, but just know that it's going to be really, really good. So anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys 9 o'clock next Thursday. Shamara, thank you so much.
Thank you.